The woman in the bath is changing. Her skin turns green and slimy. Her arms begin to warm. A long green tentacle flops over the side of the bath, then another, until she has completely transformed into a giant green octopus. In these moments, her thoughts swim with panic, trying to remember what could have possibly caused this. She remembers sitting at her desk, scrolling idly through an article. In the middle of the page, flashing text catches her eye. It reads, "She thought she was going for a normal swim, but what happened next terrified her." She clicks and opens a page to reveal a picture of a large tentacled arm stretching out of the water while a horrified woman looks on. She scrolls to the bottom of the page, then rolls her eyes and closes out of the window. How could so much horror come from simple text and a picture? When he applied to journalism school, the young man imagined himself breaking major stories, exposing corrupt politicians, and calling the results of elections, perhaps uncovering the hidden dark underbelly of a seemingly squeaky clean community. Instead, he's spending his days in an office that replaced all the chairs with exercise balls and put a ping-pong table in the conference room. They don't traffic in real journalism. They just collect as many clicks as they possibly can in order to keep the advertisers happy. This isn't what he hoped he would be doing with his life, but a gig's a gig, so he comes into the office each day and does his best anyway. 15 foods that look like faces. What kind of sweater are you? The internet is going nuts for this hungry possum. It isn't changing the world, but he's pretty good at what he does. At least he thinks so. His boss doesn't agree and calls him into his office for a meeting. The advertisers aren't pleased, his boss explains. Views are on the decline and only getting worse. In an increasingly competitive digital media landscape, they need to get as many eyes on their work as possible, and at least twice as many clicks. He tries to defend himself, to say that he's churning out content as fast as he can, but the boss won't hear it. He gives the young man a simple directive: spend the day browsing the internet and looking for the best clickbait out there. There's no use arguing with the boss when he gets in a mood. So the would-be reporter dutifully refills his coffee mug, takes a cursory glance at the motivational poster depicting a kitten hanging onto a branch with a look of determination in its eyes, and returns to his desk. Then he begins to scroll. He isn't sure how long he scrolls for. He scrolls until his coffee cup is empty, then full, then empty again. He scrolls until his eyes begin to burn and blur from the strain. He scrolls past recipe roundups and adorable, unlikely animal friendships, past celebrity gossip and incomprehensible cooking fails. None of it is even remotely helpful, and it barely makes a dent in his glassy-eyed autopilot state. Until suddenly, his scrolling comes to a halt. His cursor hovers over a headline so utterly bizarre that he can't be sure exactly whether he is really reading it or not. He rubs his eyes, blinking a few times to be sure. There, inviting, begging him to click, are the words, "Grocery clerks live in abject terror of this man. His one strange trick will save you hundreds on groceries and make your enemies weep." Of course, when he does click on the link, it's just a simple article about which coupons to clip on one's weekly grocery trip in order to get the best deals. The image attached to the piece is a bit unsettling, featuring a smiling cashier staring directly into the camera with a wide smile and tears streaming down his face. But other than that, it's nothing especially notable. By the time the writer is on his way home from work that evening and decides to swing by the grocery store to pick up a few things, he has completely forgotten about it. At least until something very unusual reminds him. The writer is approaching the cash register with his small cart full of items when he suddenly feels a curious tingling feeling in his eyes, like static electricity in the back of his eye sockets. The woman at the cash register begins to greet him, but suddenly freezes, her eyes widening, her smile dropping. Whatever she can see on his face, she is terrified of it. He catches a glimpse at himself in the security monitor near the register and sees that his eyes have gone completely black. It is as inexplicable as it is eerie, and he is just about to decide if he should seek medical attention when the cash register suddenly begins to emit a high-pitched squealing sound. There is a smell of burning plastic, and smoke begins to rise from the cash register. The increasingly panicked cashier chokes out a plea for the man to simply take his things and leave the store immediately. The man is shocked and confused, but he's also not about to turn down the offer of free groceries on a writer's budget, so he scoops up his items and runs out of the store. By the time he reaches his car, his eyes have returned to normal. Wait a second. Free groceries? A terrified cashier? That off-putting headline from before seems to have somehow come true. He can't explain exactly how it happened, but he knows one thing for certain. He's got something exciting to report to his boss in the morning. The man practically leaps out of bed in excitement the next day, rushing into the office to tell his boss about the strange encounter and its potential connection to the Clickbait research. However, his boss does not believe him, displaying a surprising amount of incredulity for someone who lines his pockets off the gullibility of online strangers. He laughs in the young writer's face, accusing him of trying to get out of work by lying. The boss sits down at his desk, returns his gaze to his computer, and tells the young writer to get out of his office and get back to work. He doesn't notice the young man's eyes suddenly going black, doesn't notice the strange burning smell in the air until his computer monitor suddenly explodes in a flash of light and a flurry of broken pieces, several of which fly directly into his eyes. The boss collapses out of his chair, lying on the ground with his hands covering his eyes, crying out in pain. The young writer is horrified at first, but then he remembers the second part of that strange headline, "Make your enemies weep." He hadn't previously considered his boss an enemy, but in this moment, he certainly seems to be weeping. The young writer calls out to his coworkers, telling them to call an ambulance for their injured boss. As one of the interns dials 911, the young writer informs his boss that he will be resigning from his position here, effective immediately. Through his tears, the boss demands to know why. The young writer shrugs and simply says, "Something I read changed my mind." The young writer packs up his desk and heads home for the day. He'll have to find a new writing job in a competitive climate, but he doesn't feel too concerned. He feels confident in himself, his ability to be heard, and his new weird trick for getting free groceries. Who knows what else the future holds, all because he took the bait and decided to click. The young writer is lucky. Not everyone who encounters a mysterious link and decides to follow it winds up with a beneficial new ability. For some, the consequences are far more disturbing, dangerous, and even deadly. He doesn't know it, but the young writer didn't just encounter an ordinary piece of clickbait journalism. He clicked on SCP-3299. SCP-3299 refers to a series of cognito-hazardous internet advertisements in the style often referred to as clickbait. These sensationalized links and headlines entice the viewer to engage with them in order to learn more about their salacious claims. They bait the person to click. You get the idea. Ordinarily, the worst outcome of clicking on a clickbait ad is a bit of wasted time, some annoyance, or possibly a few unsavory pop-ups. However, if an individual follows one of the links classified as SCP-3299 and reads the headline and full body of its associated article, they will experience an anomalous effect. This effect consists of one or more mental or physical alterations to the subject coinciding with the headline and contents of the SCP-3299 article they read. These alterations are, as far as the SCP Foundation has been able to determine, irreversible. Amnestics are unable to remove the mental effects at any dose. It should be noted, however, that some of the more minor physical alterations can be repaired, or at least hidden with surgery. So far, there have been 247 recorded variations of SCP-3299. The content of these instances is significantly different from case to case, but does tend notably toward the absurd. I was unable to access all 247 instances on record, but I did find several relevant and deeply bizarre examples. One link reading, "This woman's one weird trick will make you younger. Doctors hate her." Linked to an article including details on a homemade facial ointment made up of household goods, intended to make a person's skin look more youthful. Any subjects who read this article and were not educated to a PhD level immediately began to look noticeably younger. Their apparent age decreased by a rate between 20 and 30%. Several D-Class were instructed to read this instance, and all of them displayed a more youthful appearance immediately after. Gray hair returned to its original color, wrinkles disappeared, and in the case of one elderly D-Class, liver spots vanished from hands. Curious about the potential impact on any doctors that might be exposed to the article, researchers gathered a few volunteers from within the staff of the Foundation itself. These subjects, all of whom had at least one PhD, became consumed with irrational rage toward the woman in the article, their feelings growing so intense that they were unable to focus on anything else. Despite never meeting this woman and knowing very little about her, these doctors hated her. The administration of amnestics did nothing to quell the hatred the doctors felt toward this unknown woman, and they were eventually removed from their positions and placed under permanent medical and psychological care. All testing on non-D-Class personnel was officially suspended in order to avoid future complications of a similar nature. Another headline, reading, "This intense footage will shake even the most skeptic non-believer," led anyone who clicked on it to a short video that featured maintenance lights flashing in an underground train line tunnel. As the video progressed, the lights formed the shape of a human face. Then, the video stopped. As soon as the video clip cut out, anyone who viewed it began to physically vibrate at a frequency between 0 Hz and 2.3 kHz, their bodies producing a noticeable, unceasing sound. This effect was permanent, continuing even after a subject's death. However, aside from causing general annoyance to those around them, this change does not appear to have any long-term health impacts. One of the most unsettling instances of SCP-3299 cataloged during its initial study consisted of a link reading, "This uncomfortable video of a clam will irreversibly change you." When the unfortunate subject clicked the link, it led to an article featuring several photos of Mercenaria, hard clams, in various stages of their life cycle, with accompanying descriptive text. Notably, no video was present, in spite of the link's claims. In order to monitor the effects of this instance, a D-Class was forced to read the headline and article in its entirety. Approximately 6 hours after the man finished reading the instance, his body began to rapidly transform, taking on extreme morphological changes. His hands hardened and crusted over, forming into solid structures resembling the shells of bivalve clams. He tried to run from the room, but crashed to the floor as his legs fused together into one large, thick, single appendage that medical staff described as resembling the foot of a clam. The D-Class could not be returned to a humanoid state, and is most likely still in his clam-like form to this day. That is, unless one of the attending researchers decided to try steaming him with a white wine garlic sauce and serving him over linguine. Which I do recommend, by the way. For real clams, not people. These are only a handful of examples from the initial discovery of SCP-3299, and I can only imagine what other horrors await in the classified archives. After first thinking about SCP-3299 in 2016, I often wished that I had more examples to sort through, and approximately 1 year later, the proverbial monkey's paw curled one finger inward, and my wish was granted. On November 3, 2017, a new strain of SCP-3299 was detected on websites frequently used by popular advertising services. These new, more efficient instances consist of only one headline and an image or video. It is no longer required for a subject to read the attached article in order to trigger the adverse effects, and simply reading the headline and viewing the image or video that accompanies it are enough. One of the first new instances of SCP-3299 detected was a headline reading, "This is not a joke. You may laugh, but you shouldn't. It's quite horrifying." When a D-Class clicked this link, it led him to 7 close-up photographs of the faces of 7 individuals, each with an accompanying block of text. This text was incoherent, consisting of random combinations of various letters. At first, it appeared that there were no lasting effects from the D-Class's exposure to this instance, but then, approximately 20 minutes later, after a supervising researcher shared a particularly amusing knock-knock joke, the D-Class burst out laughing. As soon as the first laugh escaped his lips, an incorporeal entity resembling Judith Scheindlin, more commonly known as Judge Judy, manifested near him. The entity stared sternly at the man, who claimed to hear her shouting at him to cut it out, though her expression remained still to all nearby observers. 5 minutes after the test subject stopped laughing, the entity that resembled Judge Judy, but could not have possibly been Judge Judy, disappeared from view. Another anomalous link claimed, "These confidence tips will help people see you differently. Number 3 changed my life." The link led to a 40-second video clip of an unidentified man making seemingly random sounds as unrelated words flashed up on the screen. The D-Class assigned to this particular instance immediately began complaining of extreme pain as soon as the researchers in the room looked at her. When I say complaining, I really mean screaming and clutching at her head in abject agony. Being a team composed of the extremely curious and not especially empathetic, the researchers continued to look at the D-Class in spite of her pleas for them to look away. After 5 hours of continuous pain, the D-Class's skin began to harden and stiffen, preventing her from moving. 20 hours later, her skin had completely transformed. It was hard, cracked, gray in color, and resembled concrete. She was completely frozen in place, a living statue. However, as soon as the researchers averted their eyes, she transformed back into an ordinary, non-stone human being. She was placed in solitary confinement, where she presumably remains to this day whenever her anomalous state is not being tested. The link, "If your body suddenly jerks while falling asleep, this is what it means," led to an image of an unidentified woman laying in bed, her eyes wide and mouth open in a shocked expression. First, a D-class was shown this instance, and then he was instructed to go to sleep. Just as he was falling asleep, the man experienced a hypnic jerk, or a muscle spasm in the early stages of sleep. Suddenly, he vanished, and could not be found until 9:14 a.m. the following morning, when he reappeared 1 meter off the ground in the middle of the site cafeteria before crashing to the ground. Over the next few days, this anomalous effect occurred again, each time coinciding with the onset of a hypnic jerk. The D-class was not able to recall anything that happened during the missing time, and likened it into falling into a deep, dreamless sleep, only to suddenly wake up in midair somewhere he had been in the prior 48 hours, when a D-class was instructed to click on, "This local woman lost 20 kilos in a month. Click to find out what 2 ingredients she used." He was met with the image of a slender woman wearing a pair of denim jeans, several sizes too large for her, holding the waist away from her abdomen like a classic weight loss supplement ad. The text of the article was simply the word "feed," repeated 713 times. As soon as he finished reading the article, the test subject expressed an unusual craving for grass and kerosene. He was provided some of each, and much to the shock of the research team, he was willing and able to consume and metabolize both. He was given a simple peanut butter sandwich as well, but was unable to digest it. When he stopped eating grass and kerosene for longer than 3 hours, his body began to convert muscle and bone into fat cells. The process stopped as soon as he began to eat the requested materials. These changes to his digestive system were irreversible, but it did give the Foundation a convenient disposal method for any excess grass clippings or kerosene. The ultimate recorded instance of SCP-3299 that I was able to access apparently reads, threateningly, "She pulled it out thinking it was a blackhead, but it was something else. OMG." The D-class chosen for testing with this particular instance followed the link to a 21-second clip from a nature documentary that featured bees smothering a hornet to death, slowed down until it was 10 hours long. This particular D-class was selected due to the presence of a blackhead on his nose. Following his exposure to the SCP-3299 link, he was given a mirror and instructed to pop said blackhead. When he popped the blemish, a massive amount of arthropods began to pour out of the resulting wound. This continued for 32 seconds before mercifully stopping, and no additional damage remained after the arthropods stopped emerging. Since this initial test, over 5,000 different species of arthropod have been identified emerging from wounds on the test subject. The exact origin of SCP-3299 is unknown, but attempts to trace its source have turned up a pattern of inconclusive data matching that of SCP-2964, or the anomalous video streaming service Extreme Videos. All major internet advertising agencies' outputs will be monitored automatically by Foundation-designed software IO Beholder for any instances of SCP-3299. If any instances are detected, they must be deleted using previously installed Foundation Trojan software, and an attempt to track the source of the instance must be made. Individuals found to have been affected by SCP-3299 must be brought into custody and given treatment on a case-by-case basis. The ideal treatment is amnestics followed by release, but if necessary, treatments including corrective surgery and permanent containment in the anomalous humanoid wing of Site-17 may be employed. We used to believe that what happened on the internet couldn't really hurt you. Now we know better, but SCP-3299 proves that it can get so much weirder and more dangerous than viruses, identity theft, and angry pop music fans. So the next time you're casually browsing the internet and a strange headline grabs your attention, remember the 10 reasons you shouldn't click on it. Number 8 will surprise you. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-1104, Nose Crab.